Okay, hello everybody again. My name is Josh Downs from End to End. This is a webinar for single sign-on with the ARMS system. Looks like we have given everyone an opportunity to join the webinar that's going to make it to it. So we'll get started here. What we're going to talk about is the concept of simplifying the user login to the ARMS system, making this a little easier for users to have one less set of credentials to memorize and to manage. Also, hopefully making this a little easier on the IT administration and the ARMS administration side by having the users sign into ARMS using a set of credentials that are much more used frequently, much more familiar to them. So what is SSO, or single sign-on? Single sign-on is a concept where users have one less set of credentials to remember and manage for accessing all kinds of resources around the network, around the office. So for example, a network share, or even just a simple act of logging into their Windows operating system on a workstation, computer or laptop, as well as the concept of minimizing the credentials that they use to log into various applications that you may ask them to log into and use. ARMS being one of them. Perhaps there's a document management system. There might be a SharePoint intranet site, or a OneDrive or a Google Drive or something along those lines. Maybe you have a time card system, scheduling system, so forth. The concept of SSO is bringing all of these network resources and applications into allowing that user to log in with just one set of credentials that works across all platforms, all applications. So with that, users, they already have to remember their credentials to log into the computer itself. And I know sometimes that might be challenging in and of itself to the users, especially maybe when they've come back from vacation or such and have trouble remembering or something along those lines, how they used to log into ARMS, or they have forgotten and they've failed their password attempts and need someone to help them reactivate their account and so forth. So by allowing users to use just a single set of credentials to log into an application and to an operating system on the computer, or a single set of credentials to do that, plus log into their email, plus log into other file shares and things of this nature. This is what's referred to as single sign-on. One single set of credentials that is able to be used at any given time to log into operating system, log into email, log into an application such as ARMS, etc. So with SSO implemented, users just have one username and password to manage, to remember, and quite possibly they have less occurrences of the "I have forgotten my credentials" support ticket that goes on to the ARMS administrator or to the IT support technicians that manage your agency. So ARMS and single sign-on. Question of, can ARMS support SSO? Yes, it can. And how does it support that? There are two options. The first option is through Active Directory integration. Active Directory is the database that is on a server at your agency that stores the username and password for all of the users inside of the police agency. As you can, when you sit down to log into your computer and it asks you username and password, and you will typically see a domain, either a domain name or a domain abbreviation that you have to make sure is selected when you log into the Windows computer. That is usually, it's on a server that's on premise, either at the police department or at some data center somewhat nearby that is managed by your IT support team. That database, that Microsoft Active Directory database, is what's used to manage domain user login credentials for everyone to be able to sign into the computers. So if a patrol officer signs into one in the report writing room, or a dispatcher signs into one in the communications center, they are signing into the computer using their domain credentials. The second method for ARMS single sign-on is through SAML 2.0 integration. This is SAML 2.0 is kind of a worldwide standard for cloud-hosted systems, or even just systems that are applications running at the police department, but the data center might be across town or across campus or outsourced to a third-party IT group nearby, meaning that the user's credentials database is not found under the roof of the police department. In those instances, this is what you might refer to as it running over the internet. SAML integration is a worldwide standard for that. There are a few other options, but SAML is the vast majority leader of those. And it's a method of authenticating and guaranteeing that user who is trying to log in is who they say they are, beyond just a simple username and password. So the requirements for AD integration with ARMS. The ARMS server must be joined to the domain that the are affiliated with. If the server is not joined to the domain itself at the server level, wouldn't be a trusted part of that domain. Our integration, the login integration would fail. So the ARMS server must be part of the domain. On the ARMS server, there is a module known as Microsoft IIS. That module must have its Windows authentication feature enabled. The workstations that your users sit down to work and use ARMS, those must also be joined to the domain. And then lastly, inside of ARMS, the user access record for each employee should have its Active Directory user, the text field Active Directory user, filled in with the Active Directory username of the user. And in this image example, we see jdowns@e2e.local. That would be an example of a login AD username, login name for the domain e2e.local. Or at some of your agencies, agencypd.local or .com or .org, whatever your domain is, this is username at domain. Gets filled into the Active Directory user field. The user experience for an ARMS client user when Active Directory integration has been enabled. The user sits down to the workstation, they launch the ARMS client icon. That opens up the ARMS system, and when it launches, ARMS asks the Windows operating system there on the user's workstation, who is the currently logged on user, meaning what domain user has successfully logged into the Windows operating system. Windows returns that AD username of the currently logged on user back to the ARMS system. The ARMS client takes that AD username and performs a lookup against the ARMS database, specifically the ARMS user access records. It's looking to see, does that AD username exist? Is that user active? And does it have the permissions which would allow it to sign into the system? Making sure that that's not a blocked account, that's not a deactivated account. You don't want to have a terminated employee suddenly try to be able to log in. So the combinations of could that person log into Windows and could that person still technically log into ARMS must all be true for that user to be able to log in. All circumstances given to be true because the user can successfully sign into Windows domain account as a domain user, and because that domain user is affiliated with an active user access record in ARMS, then the AD integrated user login is successful and it takes the user directly into the ARMS system, the ARMS client, without the user having to enter a username and password in order to sign in. It's inherently assumed the user can sign in because they were able to log into Windows, which compares against the domain, and the domain profile exists in ARMS, and the user's ARMS user access record is still active and still has its permissions. From ARMS Mobile. ARMS Mobile is a browser-based application. While many users do use it inside of the police department, most commonly it's used on a laptop or an MDT, specifically out in the patrol car. Those laptops can be domain joined as well. So AD integration for ARMS Mobile from a domain joined laptop or MDT starts out with the user opening their web browser, and they navigate to the ARMS Mobile web address. There, they encounter a button that says current user. They click that button instead of signing in with the username and password. They just click a button, current user. And ARMS Mobile asks the laptop or the MDT, who is the current user. Windows returns that AD username. ARMS Mobile performs the lookup, same as what the client does, inside of the ARMS database to be sure that that is an active user access match for that AD username. And if it is true, all of that is true, then the user is taken into the ARMS system, again, without having to enter a username and password. You just click a button. It asks, the mobile system asks the laptop operating system who's logged in, and it goes from there. If the user is using mobile from a non-domain joined laptop or tablet or smartphone, then the concept of passively logging in the user cannot happen, because there's no domain user that logs into an iPhone or a non-domain joined laptop. In this instance, it's still possible that we have AD integrated login, but this requires the user to put in their username and password. Instead of it being the username and password that they would previously log into ARMS with, they would actually log in using their domain credentials, the same ones that they would sign into their webmail or a computer back at the office. They would enter in, they would browse to the mobile website, fill in the username with their domain username value and the password with their domain user password, not their older ARMS user password, but their domain user password. From ARMS Mobile, it will then, the server will then ask the domain controller, the AD server, if the credentials entered belong to an active domain user, and then ARMS, and if so, then ARMS Mobile will determine if those credentials also are affiliated with an active user access record in the ARMS database. All of that is true, then sign-in has been successfully completed and the user is allowed to enter into the ARMS Mobile system. So the steps to implement AD integration. Step one, for the agency's IT admin, must join the ARMS server to the domain. Step two, again, for the agency IT admin, must enable the Windows Authentication feature in the Microsoft IIS module. Step three, again, for the agency IT admin, must join the workstation where the ARMS client is installed, must join that workstation to the domain. As well, if you have some laptops and MDTs, you can join them to the domain as well if that is desired. And fourth step, this one for the agency's ARMS administrator. The user access record for each employee that you would like to be able to sign into ARMS using AD integrated single sign-on. You must go to user access record. There's a field there, the Active Directory username or AD username field. You will fill in the AD username for each of those user access records that you would want them to be able to log in this way. You don't have to do that for everyone. You can have some users just continue to use the traditional username and password. However, it's much more simple to manage for both the ARMS administrator and the users if you move on to having everyone that you can to use this AD username field. Now, please note that steps 1 and 3 above, there's a very high probability your IT admin has already joined the server to the domain and the workstations to the domain. Requirements for SAML integration. Again, this is for when you have applications running over the internet, not through a VPN to a data center or anything along those lines, particularly cloud-hosted systems. We offer SAML integration for our cloud-hosted customers if they have the desire to set this up. We encourage it, actually. So, requirements for SAML integration. Agency must use an identity provider system, often referred to as an IDP. Examples of IDP systems are Shibboleth, Okta, Duo, OneLogin, or even Microsoft ADFS. There are many different providers out there for this, and this is probably terminology that's very familiar to your IT admins. But specifically, ARMS is looking to work with one that supports SAML 2.0 based user authentication. SAML 2.0 is the latest protocol, latest version protocol for SAML. That's why we operate with it. The agency must add the ARMS server address, URL, as a trusted application inside of the configurations of the IDP. Again, this will be meaningful to your IT admin. Basically, this is like saying trust the IP address or trust the URL of the ARMS server. Configuring the IDP to answer user authentication requests forwarded to it from the ARMS server is what we just talked about. Likewise, there are some configurations our team can assist with inside of the ARMS system to tell it which IDP that it should send those authentication requests toward. And then lastly, the ARMS user access record for the employee has a field called external system token. This should be filled in with the email address of the user. And that is what the IDP sends to ARMS, is the email address of the user once the IDP has finished performing a user authentication for us. I'll explain more about that in just a moment. So the user experience with SAML integration. So this works for both ARMS Client and ARMS Mobile. It's all one user experience. User launches ARMS Client or browses to the ARMS Mobile URL. There, they will encounter the ARMS Identity Service page. It's a login page. That's something new for us the last couple of years. The Identity Service page displays a button that's labeled SSO. Most of the times, we will help it label agency name SSO. The user clicks on the SSO button, or we can even automate the clicking of that button for them. By clicking the SSO button, the user is navigated using its web browser from the ARMS Identity Service login page to the login page of the Identity Provider System, the IDP. So it's not ARMS that captures the username and password, but it's the IDP that captures the username and password. The user enters their credentials, their domain credentials, into the IDP login form. The IDP finds out if that is a valid domain user or IDP user, and then sends a response back to ARMS to let it know with a special signal that that is a valid user, and here's a unique identifier for that user. And ARMS then accepts that return message. The user is navigated automatically back from the IDP to the ARMS system. ARMS does a lookup of user access records, and if that special identifier, the external system token, is found inside of the user access record, if it has a match and it's active, then the user is logged into ARMS by virtue of the IDP system saying, yep, this is a good, valid user. Please log them into the system as this identifier. Multi-factor authentication. You might see from your CJIS auditors or from your IT persons the concept of 2FA or MFA. This is a secondary factor of proving that a user is who the user says they are. The users are who they say they are. So two-factor authentication and multi-factor. As you might guess, two-factor is two, multi-factor can be two or more. Your bank's online system that your personal banking does probably already has something similar in place. If you try to log into your online banking from a strange computer location, a strange network, it might ask you to enter in a code that gets text to your cell phone. That's what two-factor authentication is, or multi-factor authentication as well. It can be a text to your cell phone that you then turn around and key into the screen, or it can be something pushed to an application that's installed on your cell phone, your smartphone, such as like the Duo or One Login app, and so forth. The most common is text message. So in this instance, it's not ARMS that you enter the code into. It's still a part of the IDP login process. So backing up a page here, when we talked about the user launches the ARMS client or browses to the mobile URL and clicks the SSO button, they're navigated away from ARMS in the browser, they're navigated away from ARMS and to the IDP login form. There, they enter in their domain credentials, click OK. Next, they enter in the code that gets text to them and click OK again. If the first step of entering the credentials is successful and the second step is successful of entering in the code, then the user is successfully signed in to ARMS. And again, the code part is to guarantee that person trying to log in is actually believable beyond a secondary measure that they are who they say they are. So steps to implement SAML integration. For the agency IT admin, there's several steps. One would be to set up an IDP system for the agency. This is probably something that your IT admin has already done. It's not as high of a probability as the server being joined to a domain, but it's likely that they already have done this, or they're at least familiar with it, and they probably desire to do that for you because it is a great way to increase security of applications and for protecting the network from malware trying to sign in and do things. Next step for the IT admin is to set up the IDP application trust for ARMS. So imagine that an IDP is a basketball goal, and there can be any number of applications being the ball players, any number of applications shooting hoops at this goal. But the admin wants to ensure that it has control over what applications it should trust to try to log in with user credentials. So kind of like the ball that the Harlem Globetrotters used to use that was red, white, and blue versus a standard brown leather basketball. The IDP can be told, don't trust the brown leather basketball, just the red, white, and blue and the Globetrotters use. Only allow login attempts from that. That's the equivalent of setting up the trust, the application trust for the ARMS system. That is something inside of the IDP management console that your that your agency IT admin does. The agency IT admin will also work with our team to apply configurations to the ARMS system so that it knows which IDP that it should send these login requests to. The fourth step for the admin is to set up the user group that can use the single sign-on to log into ARMS. Your admin doesn't want to enable all city and town employees or all college and university employees to log in using the ARMS application trust in the IDP. They only want to allow the police department users. So they will add a group, PD users, to the single sign-on application for ARMS inside of the IDP. An optional item here, number 5, if they do want to set up multi-factor authentication, then they configure per user what is the cell phone that's going to be used to answer the token, to receive the token that's pushed out to them. And then for the ARMS admin of the agency, rather than the IT admin, the ARMS admin will fill out the external system token field for each user using the user's email address. Please note here at the bottom, your FBI CJIS security auditors very much love it whenever you can tell them that the agency has implemented multi-factor authentication. SAML integration is very big for them. Multi-factor authentication is the cherry on top. They all love that. That's the high mark that they want to see to be able to fill out on the CGIS audits whenever they're at your agency. So Tech Talk. This is a little bit more geared toward the IT side of things, not too grossly IT, but involves a little bit more tech speak. SAML integration is considered more secure than Active Directory integration. Why? Well, minimally, for someone to successfully log in with AD integration, you simply need to know the username and password of that user. So with phishing attempts, social engineering attempts, where someone might think that their credentials are compromised and they receive an email that tells them this, a malicious email, or even a malicious Facebook attempt, they're going to tell them, okay, well, we're here to help you. Please give us your domain user credentials so we can try to log in and set this back right like it's supposed to be. And an unknowing user might give a malware their domain credentials. Now that malware can impersonate that user using domain credentials all across the network. And it's up to the local IT team to determine this and put a stop to it. Whereas SAML integration minimally requires 5 things to be true rather than just one thing to be true. The user's login credentials must be known. And again, those are the same often as a domain login, but the login credentials, username and password must be known. But in addition, the ARMS app has to be configured with what IDP metadata is to be used. The ARMS app has to be configured with what IDP entity identifier must be used. This is a very long alphanumeric string. Both of them, both the metadata and the entity ID, are just a big scrambled mess of alphanumeric characters, special symbols, and so forth. Then the fourth thing, the ARMS app has to be configured with the certificate hash, again, more scrambling letters and numbers that the IDP system expects it to use. And lastly, the IDP has to be configured with these same values that point back to the ARMS system. So if you really laid it all across the board, there's like 6 or 7 different things that have to be true for SAML integration. Much difficult to hack and maliciously use versus just the AD login. The AD login is very simple for users and very simple to set up and manage. However, it is not as secure as SAML integrated login. When SAML's taken a step further to enable multi-factor authentication, that again provides an extra layer of proof the user is who they say they are. For the fact that they will receive a text or a push notification to their device, letting them know that they have to use a token that gets keyed back into the login screen, an additional login component. If you've ever received an email, let's say from Gmail, if you have a Gmail account, that says you just tried to log in somewhere from some unknown computer, that means somebody was trying to get into your account. It wasn't you. Therefore, that's why they were sending you that token to let you know to use that token to sign in or to just delete and disregard it if that was not you trying to sign in. That's what MFA does for you. More tech talk. SAML integration explained. SAML is an acronym. It stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. And again, specifically, ARMS supports SAML version 2.0. It is the latest version of the SAML protocol. SAML SSO operates through a combined work of identity provider and a service provider, i.e. an app like ARMS. The IDP, identity provider, that's your database that contains all the usernames and passwords. Examples of those are Shibboleth, Duo, Microsoft ADFS, OneLogin, Okta, etc. Service provider is any application out there that wants to leverage the IDP for performing user authentication. ARMS is a service provider. Your email can be a service provider. Your HR systems can be a service provider. All of those can authenticate its users against the IDP database. The IDP database being what stores the credentials, and the service provider is what outsources validation of those user credentials on behalf of ARMS. So ARMS is basically saying, I'm no longer going to perform the username and password comparison. I'm going to outsource that to the IDP. And if the user can pass the authentication at the IDP, then I will trust that the IDP was correct when it is logged back, and it sends the message back to ARMS. Those messages that go back and forth are known as assertion, request, and response. We submit a request to the IDP from ARMS. The IDP sends a response back to us. Those, again, log in for how it works. SAML integration for the user, they approach the identity service login form, the ARMS identity service login form. Click the SSO button. The user's browser takes over and navigates it to the login page of the IDP. That navigation means sending an assertion request to the IDP. The IDP webpage collects all of the login information, and if the user is successfully logged in, it navigates the user back to the ARMS login page. That response that comes back to the ARMS page is known as the assertion response. And inside of that response is a unique set of values that tells us which ARMS user it is that is attempting to log in. That's all for our presentation for the slideshow. We would like to open up the floor for any questions anyone would have.
And just to let you guys know, sorry, Josh, just wanted to jump in. If you do have any questions, if you move your mouse around on the screen right now, you can go down to the very bottom of the page and see Manage Participant, or I'm sorry, a button that just says Participant. And then you can click on that, and it'll open up on the sidebar over here all the participants. And at the very bottom, you should see a button that says Raise Hand. If you do have a question, go ahead and click on that button. And then it'll raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can ask your question. All right, it looks like there are no questions. I think, Josh, you pretty much covered everything, so I'll pass it back to you and you can go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you, Devin. Anybody that comes up with any questions later, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at the 800 number or the support email address if you come up with some questions that you think of at a later time. We can be glad to send any kind of single sign-on integration information to you so that you can share that with your IT team as well. We do not mind hopping on a short conference call to discuss how we can get this implemented for you. And unless there's any last second questions, looks like we do have one now. Okay, Ali, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Ali. I'm with the University of Colorado Police Department. My question is in regards to the certificate that is, we're currently, right now we're using the Active Directory integration. We've implemented the SAML on various applications, and ARMS is one on the list to move it into that group of applications. My question in regards to the certificate, do you guys, or does the integration with ARMS, does it require like a self-generated or one of the commercially available, like from Komodo, for example?
The certificate is used by ARMS to sign the single logout message that we would send to the IDP. So everything else comes to us using the IDP certificate, and ARMS would only use one itself whenever doing a single logout. And for that, a self-signed certificate from your server, your ARMS server itself, is just fine. Or one that you might want to create with PowerShell or OpenSSL. It's perfectly fine to use that. We just need the hash and the password for it to put into the ARMS configs, and that'll take care of it.
And is that the same recommendation for the web, the report writer?
They will all go through the one ARMS identity service all single sign-on goes through the identity service component of ARMS, so it's good for both the client and the web.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions before we part? All right, everyone. Well, thank you for your time and joining the call today, joining the webinar. Devin, I believe, posts these online as well, so please look for an email that's going to go out to everyone through Constant Contact to kind of let you know once this video is available from our website. And I hope you have a good afternoon into the rest of your day. All right, thank you again.